Hi, I am Hallie Schulwolf. We are just going ahead and we're going to give a few more minutes to let anyone come on who is still going to join. Um, but this is going to be a webinar on preparing your child for first grade and what you can do over the summer to help make sure your child is all ready to go in the start of the school year, which will be in a few weeks. So I'm going to give everyone a few more minutes to just join, and then we will go ahead and get started. All right, it is 8:31, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I will be presenting today for the webinar. My name is Hallie Schulwolf, and this is going to be a webinar on first grade readiness. So the mission of Evolved is around to ensure that each student learns well and to come up with different ways to support each child and create an individualized plan to kind of ensure that each child is successful. So what we're going to be focusing on today is first grade readiness, and the webinar is part of a series that we will be presenting through Evolved, which is offering different webinars to empower parents, so to give parents the tools that they can use in order to help their child get ready for the upcoming school year. So there's going to be with this it will be directed towards parents, and also it will be providing them with the tools that they will need in order to prepare for the upcoming grade. So there will be a series of these webinars, and tonight is on rising first grade. So in addition to these webinars, Evolved also works on giving customized one-to-one tutoring for students that are in from nursery all the way up until high school. We work on parent education consulting and school placement advisement. So a little bit about me. My name is Hallie Schulwolf. I graduated from Kenyon College in 2017 with a degree in psychology and in American Studies with an education concentration. I also have been teaching in New York for the past 3 years as a kindergarten teacher, and I have my New York City teaching certification, and I've graduated from Relay School of Graduation Relay School. With a degree in education and my master's of education. So I have been teaching kindergarten for the past 3 years. I'm going into my 4th year of teaching kindergarten, and I am really excited to talk about first grade, as a lot of the skills that I'm sure, have seen with your children in kindergarten is going to be fully reinforced in first grade. So as we begin the webinar, I want everyone to kind of think about what your goals are for your child this year in first grade. So it may be thinking about a skill that your child worked on in kindergarten that you want them to really perfect this year, a skill that you want them to strengthen, a skill that you would like them to work on. And feel free, I didn't mention this before, but if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to write them in the chat. There's a question box, so please feel free to write them there, or you can write them in the chat itself, and anything that you would like clarification on, please just let me know and I'd be happy to clarify. So if you want to go ahead, and if you can go ahead and write in the chat a goal that you may have for your child for first grade. So I'll give everyone a second to think about what they would love for their child to learn. Um, and if anyone has something that they would like to write in the chat, that would be, feel free to. If not, you can just think about a goal that you have and keep that in mind for the throughout this webinar. All right. So through this webinar, we're going to be going through a few different topics. So we'll be going through literacy, math, the social emotional development, your child's fine and gross motor and expressive fine and gross motor skills, and then expressive and receptive language. So as we're going through those topics, there's three kind of questions that I would love for you to consider as we go through all of these different topics. So the first thing to consider and to think about is what your child should know at the beginning of the school year. You also want to think about what tools you may need to support your child's readiness. And then lastly, we'll be thinking about how to use these tools effectively. So those are the three questions that to consider as we go through each different part of the topics. So first, we're going to discuss literacy. So at the end of kindergarten, your child should be reading on average at a level D. So I want to really stress that this is a continuum, that everyone, especially in remote learning, may have ended kindergarten at a different level. Your child may be past a level D, they may be before a level D, and that's okay, especially how remote learning was. Your child may be in a different spot, and that is okay. This is when your child, this is a great time for your child to really either work on different skills or to kind of work on skills before or after that level D. So at this point, in addition to being around a level D reading level, your child should also be able to work on their sight words. So they should be working and able to recognize at least 50 words at the end of kindergarten. We would love for your child to know at least 250. So going into first grade, you really want your child to know as many sight words as possible. And lastly, your child should be able to answer simple comprehension questions, such as who's the main character in the story, what is the setting of the story, what is the problem, what is the solution to the story. Those are all things, and really to focus on character feeling is a big skill that we work on at the end of kindergarten, going and reinforced into first grade. So those are some things that your child should know. Something that we're thinking about and what you can use to help your child practice and become even more skilled in those, in reviewing those skills that they should know, is to find level D books and have your child read them independently. And the way that you can find the level of a book, often it will say it on the back. There's lots of different kind of ways that there are books that are leveled. So some books are leveled A through Z, and there's other different ways that other different reading systems that different systems use. So in order to figure out what level the book is, you can always look at the back of the book, or if you could ask the librarian, they should know. If it's online, I would recommend trying to find the level on the back. So in addition, you want to really practice sight words and practice those sight word recognition both in text and out of text. So that means practicing on a sight word on a flashcard in addition to practicing on the actual within the text itself. And lastly, you can use either ABC Mouse, is a great reading and phonics website, in addition to Reading A to Z. to keep practicing phonics. So something that you'll continue to practice also is you'll see like this book that I've posted called How Do They Swim? Children at a level D are practicing a lot of pattern and finding a tricky word within a pattern. So that's a big skill that you can continue to work on with your child. So additionally, in addition, like to as to what I'd said previously, ways to practice are using flashcards with high frequency sight words. You also can ask, you always want to make sure that you're asking both comprehension and decoding questions while a child is reading. So some children may be really strong in decoding. So that would be like breaking apart a word, sounding the word out, recognizing your sight words, while other children may be really strong with their decoding, but they may need more support with their text comprehension. So as I've listed on this slide, these are all really great questions that I use within the classroom. And I know that they use them in first grade as well to support both comprehension and decoding skills. So something that I always encourage parents to ask their children when they're reading, and this is something that you can do both when the child is reading independently and when you're reading a text to the child, is asking them questions such as, who's the main character? What is the setting of the story? What is X's problem? So like, what is X character's problem? How are they trying to fix it? And how does that problem get fixed? So those are all things that you want to be asking them both throughout the text and kind of at random at the end of the text. And then something, if your child is struggling to answer those kinds of comprehension questions, you can always, we prompt them with, if they're not sure, we can ask them like, oh, can you tell me more about that? Or asking them like, what in the story makes you think that? Or if they are kind of coming to an inference, but they're not fully there, you can ask them like, so what does that make you think? And pushing them to really continue to explain their thoughts further. If they are understanding the text and they may be struggling more with decoding, that is something that we also, in going into first grade and at the end of kindergarten, decoding and comprehension are really hand in hand. Like those are something that the skills that you're going to want to focus on both at this like simultaneously. So if they're struggling with decoding, you can ask them the following questions. You could ask them, what sound does letter X make? If they're really struggling, if they continue to say a word and it is not like a nonsense word, and they're sounding it out, you can ask them like, is that a real word? Have you heard that word before? And usually they'll say no. And then you can then prompt them, like say like, okay, let's go back and try to sound it out again. Also asking them like, what chunk or blend do you see in this word? So trying to isolate certain parts of the word is really helpful for them. So encouraging them to cover up part of the word and look at just what they know in the word and then go back and sound out the full word. So it's really important, especially as a new reader, to encourage your child to try to sound these words out themselves. I know, and encouraging them, saying things like, I know this is really tricky for you, but I know you're going to work through it, because I know I definitely see at this, some of the readers can feel frustrated when they are not sounding out the words, but you want to really continue to push them to sound the words out for themselves, because it's going to push their confidence when they get to continue reading. The last thing I'd want to push with literacy, in addition to comprehension and with decoding, is working on their fluency. So if you notice your child is doing a really nice job with reading, with their decoding skills, you can start to work with them on making sure that they're reading fluently. So instead of reading word by word, they're starting to kind of find phrases that they're reading. We call it scooping. So if the sentence is, the dog goes to the park, instead of having them read, the dog goes to the park, you would want to encourage them to read and as like the dog goes to the park, so that they're noticing chunks and they start to read more fluently. Before I move on, are there any questions that anyone may have about literacy, about how to support literacy, um, or anything that you have questions about in terms of reading? Okay. We're now going to move on. And if you do happen to come up with a question, feel free to write in the chat, and I will go back to it. All right. So moving on to math. So if with math, as I'm sure many of you saw going into and at the end of the year, you're working a lot on number stories and working a lot on having firm number recognition. So in the beginning of kindergarten, there is a lot of just number ID within 1 to 10. And by the end of kindergarten, you'll have noticed that numbers have gotten a lot bigger, that children are being asked to manipulate numbers in different ways and more complex ways, and understand how to answer questions both in with physical objects and in addition to representing on their paper. So students will need to, going into first grade, something that is really important is that students are able to write all their numbers 0 through 100. And it's really important that their numbers are not backwards. So in the beginning of kindergarten, you may have noticed that your child was writing numbers backwards. So we see numbers 3, we see number 5, we see 9, 7, a lot of them backwards. But it's really important that going into first grade, your child is able to write all those numbers correctly. It's also super important that they're able to write two-digit numbers, not reversed. So, for example, sometimes we'll see children write the number, if we say write the number 21, they may write the number 12. And if you point and ask them, you say, what number is this? They'll still say 21. So it's really important to practice. If this is something that you're noticing your child does, if you have them write a number either in isolation or if they're writing it in a sequence, that you kind of, something that we do in school is we have a little song that we sing and we go, like if the number is 21, it would be 21 is a 2 and a 1. So having them verbalize that and making sure that they're writing down the number they say first, and not like doing, if the number is 21, they're writing 2 and then 1, and not 1, like 1 and then the 2 in front, because that's something we also see a lot. So the first number you write is the first number in the number. Second, we also want to make sure that students are able to count up to 100 and understand the value of numbers up to 100. So understanding that the number 5 is equal to 5 objects is equal to counting out 5, so that the representation of a number is the same, and understanding that value across multiple ways of counting. Lastly, we also want to make sure that students are able to solve addition and subtraction story problems with numbers up to 20. So in order to support your child in being able to do all of those things, I highly recommend using a hundreds chart or a number line. So if your child is struggling with numbers, or even we use this like even with our students who are not struggling, it's having that visual, which is really important at this age. Like developmentally, they need to see those numbers to kind of be able to work with them, to understand them. So having a number chart is super important. I recommend having students use Unifix cubes. So the stackable cubes that you see, those are Unifix cubes. They are really, really important. I know in my classroom, we are always using those to solve story problems prior to any kind of we solve with our cubes first, and then we use our pencil and paper to solve on paper. So at this age, it's really important that children, even going into first grade, are still using tools to support their learning. So they are able to have that visual connection to the written connection that they're doing on their paper. So I really encourage families to get a set of cubes for their children to act out story problems or any kind of like addition, comparing, any kind of math, to really use cubes and solve with those cubes first. And it helps them understand visually what they're doing. And then they're able to transfer that onto paper. Last, something that we use a lot in the classroom are counting bears. These are really important to also to use to reinforce topics that we go over in kindergarten, such as comparing amounts, which is something that's also gone over a lot in first grade. Also thinking about like making patterns, also thinking about sorting in terms of like different attributes. So having them be able to sort between like red bears and blue bears, is something that is also something that we would use them to practice. So how to use all these tools. You can use, I kind of just went over some of the different ways, but also you can give your child simple addition and subtraction story problems. So you can do this by writing an actual story problem. You could also do this by it could be really simple by doing anything like in the store of like, if I have 10 bags of goldfish and I want to buy 6 more, how many do I have now? And having them come up with those, making those real life connections is going to be really important, for them to see how we use that math in everyday kind of scenarios. So you also want to practice number writing from a number other than 1. So it's really important that they're practicing how to start writing a number, how to start at writing at like say 12 and like keep going. Last, you also want to have them practice with number patterns. So if counting by 2s, counting by 5s, counting by 10s, and counting by 1s is all great practice for them to be doing. Also sorting by like finding patterns within objects. So if you were using the bears, you could do like create a pattern, have them complete a pattern. So if it was like red bear, blue bear, green bear, have them complete a pattern, is great to practice. And lastly, just continuing to reinforce topics that we went over in kindergarten. So those would be shapes, calendar, comparing, all of those, time, all of those things can be continued to be practiced and reinforced in over the summer because they will all be covered in first grade. If anyone are there any questions about math or how to support your child with math? Okay. All right. So moving on to social and emotional development. So going into first grade, as you will have seen, your child is becoming a lot more aware of their emotions. However, they may struggle to sometimes kind of put to words those emotions that they're feeling. So they have a deeper understanding of their emotional range, and they also are able to have like a deeper sense of the world around them and how their actions are beginning to affect others. So children often also want to do activities more independently, and they like spending time with others. So something that I really want to kind of emphasize that is great to kind of push and emphasize for your child at this time is wanting to do activities independently. So you often at this point, like you will want your child to fully be able to kind of do things that they may have wanted help with before and kind of encourage them to do them independently. So I'm thinking about like getting dressed in the morning, being able to tie their shoes. Those are all things that you want to give your child autonomy and having them try to do those by themselves, because it's going to push their confidence and they're going to also want to do them by themselves. So also you will want to, as your child is developing their kind of understanding of emotions and emotional range, you'll want to help encourage them to provide different feeling words for them to use. So they may often need help verbalizing any emotion that they're feeling. So they may either incorrectly label a feeling, or they may describe something, but they may not be able to verbalize what they're feeling. So in order to help them, you can kind of give them the word and say, like, it sounds to me like you may be feeling X. Do you think that kind of like, is that how you feel? And giving them the actual feeling word will then they'll be able to start being able to verbalize their feelings more often, and more easily. Are there any questions with ways to support social emotional development? Okay. So in terms of fine and gross motor skills, at this point, your child has developed a really strong pencil grip. This is something that you want to really, really continue to push for them. So the picture of the child on this page, like, that is the ideal pencil grip, helping hand flat. You want to encourage them, even in remote learning, to continue to practice those skills, to practice making sure that they're sitting up tall and still have that, or they're still developing, how to sit in the desk, how to be in school. So continuing to reinforce that at home is really important. So at this point, you should also see that they're able to have neater handwriting. Their drawings should become clear. So you really want to make sure that and you're encouraging and correcting their handwriting, making sure that it's much neater. At this point, their letter formation should be pretty strong. If it's not, I would recommend getting a book for tracing letters. And there, at the end of this webinar, you will receive an email with a bunch of tools that I have created, or I have create a list of a bunch of tools that you will be able to use in order to support your child. And one of them is a book to practice handwriting and to practice tracing. So I would recommend you purchasing that, and you can use that to help your child. So it's a bunch of tools from Amazon that you'll be able to have access to. So you will also start to see your child will have a more mature jumping skills. So they'll be able to jump with more clarity, I guess. And they also will be able to throw and catch with more accurately. So ways that you can continue to encourage your child to develop their fine and gross motor skills is by playing physical games with your child. So you want to practice, like, playing catch with your child. Any kind of sports that require coordination and kind of improving their coordination and fine motor skills is going to help build their confidence and increase their agility and, like, their ability to have more developed gross motor skills. And also just really encouraging and reinforcing correct pencil grip. So correct way to hold a pencil, correct way to use scissors. Those are all skills that you want to continue to reinforce. So in terms of their expressive and receptive language, this is really important to develop for your child, both in school and out of school. And so one thing that you want to really encourage your child to do at this age is have them speak clearly and to be understood and in complete sentences. So you want them to be answering questions and doing so in more than one word answers. So giving them sentence stems if they're speaking in one word responses, and encouraging them to repeat the question to you. So you also want to continue asking them asking them who, what, when, where, and why questions. So that's really also helping to reinforce their comprehension skills, which is going to be really important in terms of their reading comprehension as well. You also want to, children should be talking on topic, and they should be speaking directly to others, and also allowing others to speak. So encouraging children to let their friend talk, and then sharing their own opinion. So it should be more conversational, between between children. Children should also be able to follow multi-step directions, so that you should be able to ask children, like, go upstairs, grab your jacket, put it on, come back downstairs, and they should be able to follow all of those directions clearly. And you also can encourage them to, they should be able to remember and repeat back what you say to them. So if you ask them a direction, they should be able to tell you exactly the direction that you gave them, and tell them what you said. So in order to support your child with this, you should encourage them to speak in a complete sentence. So encouraging your child to give you a full answer. So if you as a complete thought. So asking them, like, do you like ice cream? You want them to always say, like, yes, I like ice cream, and not just yes. You also want to consistently ask them the 5W questions. So those questions mentioned earlier really help support comprehension. And lastly, you want to encourage your child to repeat directions when they're given to you. That not only ensures that they hear you and they understand, but also that they are able to fully comprehend the directions that you gave them. And so that brings us to any questions. If there are any questions about anything that I've shared so far, you are more than welcome to share in the chat. And yeah, so that was okay. So if there's no questions, I just want to thank you all so much for attending the webinar tonight, and for learning about a few different things that you can practice with your child as they get ready for first grade and get ready for the school year. I do want to also share that I will be offering one-on-one tutoring for first grade readiness. And so in that pack, like, if you are interested in doing first grade readiness tutoring, I'll be working both with you and with your child, to develop develop a plan that's going to teach the student what they need to develop. So if your child may need more support with reading, I'll help you develop a plan to support your child with reading. If it's math, I would be doing the same for math, or I can be doing a mix of both math and reading. So I will be doing this throughout August. And if you are interested, you can email Stephanie at admin@evolved.com. So I'll be working with any family that's interested on helping to further prepare their child for first grade. We'll be probably going over some of the things I talked about in the seminar. Also, just more individualized tutoring for your child, and figuring out to best support your child for first grade. So if there are no further questions, I just want to thank everyone again for attending the webinar, and we're really looking forward to a great school year. So thank you again so much for your time tonight.
Still on.
I'm trying to figure out how do I stop. Oh. How do I end? Oh.